March 15th, 2019. Across 4 different time zones, something unexpected happened exactly at 11:47 p.m. Witnesses in 17 different cities reported the same impossible experience. Time itself seemed to glitch. Conversations were cut off mid-sentence, and once continued, the speakers had no clue what they were about to say. Clocks jumped forward by exactly 1 hour in a span of what felt like a single breath. Phone screens flickered, displaying the timestamps that made no sense. Sarah Martinez was working her usual late shift at a Portland radio station when it happened. She had been reading the evening weather forecast live on air, her voice carrying across the city to thousands of listeners tuned in for their nightly update. Suddenly, she found herself staring at the microphone in complete confusion, with no memory of what she had been saying. The studio clock showed it was 47 minutes past midnight, but her last clear memory was from 11:47 p.m. An entire hour had vanished from her consciousness, without leaving so much as a trace. But here's what makes this case absolutely chilling. The security cameras throughout the radio station captured continuous footage with no gaps, no static, no interruption whatsoever. Yet everyone who appeared in those recordings insisted they had experienced the same temporal void that Sarah described. This pattern repeated itself in city after city across the country. In Denver, a night security guard found himself completing rounds he had no memory of starting. In Chicago, a nurse discovered she had somehow finished an entire hour of patient documentation without any recollection of writing it. In Atlanta, a taxi driver realized he had driven several fares to their destinations during time he couldn't remember experiencing. Dr. Michael Chen, a physicist at Stanford University, was among the first researchers to investigate these reports. What he discovered in the data challenged his fundamental understanding of how time functions. The affected locations weren't random. When plotted on a map, they formed a precise geometric configuration that suggested some kind of coordinated phenomenon. The duration was identical in every case, down to the second. Most disturbing of all, electromagnetic readings from weather stations in each affected area showed unusual spikes at the exact moment witnesses reported losing time. Chen's preliminary analysis suggested something he initially refused to believe. The data pointed toward what could only be described as a mass timeline desynchronization event. Reality itself had briefly stuttered, skipping forward like a damaged recording, while leaving physical evidence completely intact. If time could jump forward without affecting the material world, what did that say about the nature of existence itself? The second anomaly involves something far more sinister than missing time. It concerns the systematic alteration of collective memory in ways that suggest multiple versions of history are bleeding into each other. Everyone knows about the Mandela effect, those shared false memories that millions of people experience simultaneously. But what's been happening recently goes far beyond simple misremembering. The discrepancies have become surgical in their precision, affecting professionals with detailed knowledge of their respective fields. Movie enthusiasts remember entire scenes from films that research shows never existed. Marketing professionals recall product logos with specific design variations that no company ever created. History teachers find themselves contradicting textbooks they swear they've been using for decades. Jennifer Walsh discovered this phenomenon while researching a paper on Cold War diplomatic history. She had vivid memories of learning about a specific meeting between President Kennedy and Soviet Premier Khrushchev that took place in Vienna during 1962. She could recall her professor discussing the details, the textbook passages that described the encounter, even photographs displayed on the classroom wall showing the two leaders shaking hands. But when she tried to verify these details for her research, she found no record of such a meeting ever occurring. According to every official source, Kennedy and Khrushchev never met face-to-face in Vienna that year. The meeting she remembered so clearly had apparently never happened. Yet her memory of it included specific details that were too coherent and interconnected to be simple fabrication. This pattern extends across multiple fields and industries. Graphic designers report creating logos that now exist in completely different forms, with their original designs apparently never having existed. Film students remember studying directors, whose work appears to have been retroactively altered. Musicians insist they performed at venues that claim no record of ever hosting them. These aren't vague childhood memories or half-remembered dreams. These are detailed, specific recollections held by experts in their fields. Dr. Rebecca Torres, a cognitive psychologist studying the phenomenon, made a disturbing discovery during her research. The false memories weren't random or chaotic. They followed consistent patterns that suggested coherent, alternate versions of reality. The details were too logical, too interconnected, and too systematically organized to be simple tricks of human memory. It was as if multiple versions of history were somehow overlapping, creating a patchwork of memories that spanned different timelines. The implications were staggering. If these weren't false memories, but actual memories from alternate realities, then the barriers between dimensions might be far more permeable than anyone had imagined. Our third case involves a man who did something that should be mathematically impossible according to every law of physics we understand. Thomas Rivera worked as a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility outside Phoenix, Arizona. His daily routine was as predictable as clockwork, following the same schedule and driving the same route home every single weekday. The journey from his workplace to his suburban home covered 40 miles and typically took him 53 minutes, accounting for traffic patterns and construction delays he had memorized over years of making the same trip. His departure and arrival times were so consistent that his wife could practically set her watch by them. On September 4, 2021, Thomas Rivera accomplished something that defies the fundamental nature of cause and effect. According to multiple synchronized digital systems, he arrived home 13 minutes before he left work. The GPS system in his car recorded his departure from the facility parking lot at exactly 5:45 p.m. and 37 seconds. His home security system logged him pulling into his driveway at 5:32 p.m. and 15 seconds. Both devices were connected to the same network time protocol. Both showed identical dates. The mathematical impossibility was undeniable, yet the evidence was irrefutable. Rivera himself noticed nothing unusual about the drive home. He remembered the same traffic patterns, the same construction zones, the same radio program playing during his commute. His fuel consumption matched the expected amount for the distance traveled. His car's odometer showed the correct mileage. From his perspective, everything had been completely normal. It was only when his wife mentioned that he was home earlier than usual that he began questioning what had happened. But the mystery deepened when traffic enforcement cameras along his route revealed something even more disturbing. At 5:38 p.m., cameras at two different intersections, 23 miles apart, captured clear images of his vehicle simultaneously. The license plate was perfectly visible in both photographs. The timestamps were identical down to the second. According to the laws of physics, Thomas Rivera's car had somehow existed in two places at the same time. Every device he owned told the same impossible story. His smartphone's location history showed the reverse temporal displacement. His smartwatch recorded the backwards journey through time. His car's onboard computer logged arrival times that preceded departure times by 13 minutes. Investigators initially dismissed the Rivera incident as a digital error, suggesting that computer glitches could easily account for timestamp discrepancies and camera malfunctions. But every piece of technology Rivera interacted with that day told the exact same impossible story. The consistency across multiple independent systems created a web of evidence that couldn't be explained away by simple technical failures. What makes this case particularly unsettling is how normal everything felt to Rivera himself. He experienced no disorientation, no missing time, no sense that anything unusual had occurred. The temporal displacement was completely imperceptible to his consciousness, yet mathematically undeniable according to the digital records. This suggests that dimensional shifts might be happening around us constantly without our awareness, visible only through the precise measurements of our technological systems. Our fourth anomaly takes us back nearly 1,000 years to medieval England, where two children appeared under circumstances that sound like science fiction, written centuries before the genre existed. During the reign of King Stephen in the 12th century, residents of the village of Woolpit in Suffolk discovered two children wandering near their community. These weren't ordinary lost children seeking help from strangers. Their skin possessed a distinct greenish tint that no medical condition of the time could explain. They spoke in a dialect that no scholar could identify, using words and grammatical structures that bore no resemblance to any known language. Most remarkably, they claimed to come from a land where the sun never achieved full brightness, where everything existed in perpetual twilight. The children's account of how they arrived in Woolpit reads like a detailed description of interdimensional travel. They described following what they called a bright sound through underground passages that seemed to stretch impossibly far. This sound led them through caverns and tunnels that defied normal geography. When they finally emerged into daylight, they found themselves in a world completely different from their own. The sun blazed with an intensity they had never experienced. The people around them looked different from anyone they had ever seen. The very air felt strange against their skin, as if the atmospheric composition itself was unfamiliar. Brother Thomas, a monk who carefully documented their story, noted details that modern researchers find particularly compelling. The children described celestial patterns that didn't match the night sky visible from medieval England. They spoke of customs and technologies that wouldn't be invented for centuries. Most intriguingly, they demonstrated knowledge of geographical features that existed nowhere in the known world of their time. Their descriptions included mountain ranges, river systems, and climate patterns that bore no resemblance to any location on Earth. The girl, who survived longer than her companion, gradually adapted to her new environment over several months. Her green coloration slowly faded, and she learned enough of the local language to communicate more effectively. But she never stopped insisting that she came from somewhere else entirely, a place where people lived differently, where the natural world operated under different rules, where time itself seemed to flow at an unfamiliar pace. Modern timeline researchers interpret this medieval account as one of the earliest recorded instances of interdimensional crossover. The children's description of following a bright sound through connecting passages mirrors contemporary theories about how conscious beings might transition between parallel realities. Their gradual adaptation to the new timeline suggests that human consciousness possesses an inherent ability to synchronize with alternate versions of reality when given sufficient time. The fifth case brings us to modern Los Angeles, where a woman discovered that 8 months of her daily routine had apparently been based on infrastructure that never existed. Jennifer Patterson had been taking the same route to work for nearly a year, using exit 47B off Interstate 205 to reach her office in suburban Los Angeles. The route had become muscle memory, as automatic as breathing. She knew every curve of the off-ramp, every traffic light between the highway and her destination, every landmark that marked her progress through the morning commute. The exit had guided her journey hundreds of times without fail, becoming an integral part of her daily routine. On the morning of October 12th, 2022, Jennifer Patterson discovered that exit 47B had never existed. The revelation came gradually, building like a slow-motion nightmare as she approached her usual turning point. She was running late for an important client presentation, following her familiar route when she noticed something was fundamentally wrong. The exit sign that should have guided her off the highway simply wasn't there. She slowed down, scanning the roadside for the blue and white marker that had been her navigation point for months. Instead, she found only concrete barriers and scrub vegetation where the exit should have been located. The highway stretched ahead with exits for 46A and 48C, but the space between them showed no evidence that another exit had ever been planned or constructed. Patterson pulled over at the next available exit and immediately called the Department of Transportation. The conversation that followed left her more confused and disturbed than before. According to official records, Exit 47B had never been built. The highway design showed a deliberate gap in that location due to geological instability that made construction impossible. No permits had ever been issued for work at that site. When she provided the cross streets that the exit had connected to, the representative informed her that those roads didn't intersect with the interstate system anywhere in the Los Angeles area. The route she had been taking daily for 8 months was officially impossible, according to every government database and engineering survey. The impossibility of the situation drove Patterson to investigate further through her own records. She contacted her insurance company to verify the daily mileage logs that determined her premium rates. Every entry for the past 8 months showed she had traveled the exact distance that would require using the non-existent exit. Her car's navigation system had recorded hundreds of instances of taking that precise route, complete with turn-by-turn directions and arrival time estimates. GPS tracking on her smartphone showed a consistent pattern of leaving the highway at the exact coordinates where exit 47B should have been located. The data trail was comprehensive and undeniable, yet it described a route that apparently couldn't exist in physical reality. Traffic enforcement cameras provided the most disturbing evidence of all. Patterson requested footage from the California Department of Transportation covering her morning commute routes. The recording showed her vehicle following the highway normally until it reached the location of the missing exit. For exactly 7 frames, captured over the span of less than half a second, the cameras recorded something extraordinary. Her car appeared to turn onto a road that curved away from the highway into what was now empty space. The road looked fully constructed, complete with lane markings, proper signage, and engineering specifications that met all highway standards. In the very next frame, the road had vanished entirely, replaced by the concrete barrier that currently occupied the site. Highway engineers who reviewed the footage described what they witnessed as ghost infrastructure. The term referred to phantom construction that appeared in surveillance systems without any corresponding physical reality. The phenomenon had been reported at construction sites worldwide, but never with such clarity or duration. Dr. Amanda Foster, who specialized in analyzing traffic anomalies, noted that the road visible in those 7 frames appeared to be professionally engineered and properly maintained. The infrastructure looked as real and solid as any highway exit in the transportation system. Yet it existed only in that brief moment captured by the cameras. Our 6th anomaly involves a family photograph that changed its contents while sitting in the same frame for over 30 years. Margaret Chen had looked at the image thousands of times throughout her life. It captured a moment from her 8th birthday party in 1987, showing 6 children gathered around a cake decorated with pink roses. Her younger brother David stood to her left in the photograph, making bunny ears behind her head with that mischievous expression she remembered so well. Her cousins surrounded them, all wearing the bright clothing and awkward smiles that defined childhood celebrations of that era. The image had been a constant in her life, a touchstone of family history that never changed. On the morning of July 3rd, 2023, Margaret Chen discovered that her brother David was alive in a completely different way than she remembered. The realization came during her weekend cleaning routine as she dusted the familiar photograph. She glanced at the image and stopped, confused by what she was seeing. Standing in David's usual position was her cousin Michael, who had died in a car accident when he was 12 years old. Michael was making the same bunny ears gesture, wearing the same mischievous expression she had always associated with David. But David was nowhere to be seen in the photograph, as if he had never been there at all. the implications hit her immediately and terrifyingly. If Michael was alive in the photograph, then what had happened to David? She called her mother with trembling hands, struggling to form the words to describe what she was experiencing. The conversation that followed challenged everything she understood about her own family history. According to her mother, Michael had never died in childhood. He was now 36 years old, working as an engineer in Seattle, married with 2 children. David, on the other hand, had been the one killed in the accident that Chen remembered taking Michael's life. The family histories had completely reversed themselves while she wasn't paying attention. The photograph itself underwent forensic analysis at Margaret's insistence. Digital imaging experts found no evidence of manipulation, editing, or alteration of any kind. The paper stock, chemical composition, and aging patterns were consistent with a photograph taken in 1987 and stored under normal conditions for over 3 decades. The image showed no signs of the artifacts that typically accompanied photo editing, even when examined with the most sophisticated detection software available. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, a specialist in memory disorders, studied Margaret's case for over 6 months. Her findings challenged conventional understanding of how memory and reality intersect. The specificity and consistency of Margaret's recollections suggested something far more complex than simple false memory formation. Her memories included sensory details, emotional context, and interconnected events that formed a coherent alternate history spanning decades. Decades. The 7th anomaly takes us to the heart of London's public transport system, where reality decided to take a 24-hour detour without telling anyone. Route 73 connects Stoke Newington to Victoria Station, winding through the city's busiest districts with the mechanical precision that defines London's transportation network. The double-decker buses that serve this route operate on schedules coordinated down to the minute, their movements tracked by sophisticated digital systems that leave no room for error. But on Thursday morning, March 9th, 2023, bus number 4477 began operating under a completely different set of rules. The first sign that something was fundamentally wrong came when commuters waiting at the Stoke Newington terminus noticed the electronic destination board displaying an impossible date. The route number and final destination appeared correctly, but the date showed March 10th instead of March 9th. Passengers initially dismissed it as a simple computer glitch, the kind of minor technical hiccup that occasionally affects aging transportation systems. But as commuters began boarding the vehicle, the anomaly revealed itself to be far more comprehensive and disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Sarah Williams tapped her Oyster card against the payment reader at exactly 7:32 a.m., expecting the familiar beep that confirmed her fare. Instead, she received a receipt showing Friday's date, complete with Friday morning pricing that differed from Thursday's rates. The onboard announcement system welcomed passengers to Friday service, despite every calendar, smartphone, and digital clock in London confirming it was still Thursday. Throughout the journey, every automated system on the bus operated as if it were 24 hours in the future. The internal clocks visible to passengers consistently displayed Friday's date and time. The GPS tracking showed the vehicle following Friday's modified route, which included stops and timing changes that weren't scheduled to take effect until the following day. Transport for London's control centre received dozens of calls about Bus 4477 throughout the morning. Controllers monitoring the vehicle's progress witnessed something unprecedented on their tracking systems. The bus appeared to be operating simultaneously on both Thursday and Friday schedules, generating duplicate signals as if 2 identical vehicles were running the same route exactly 1 day apart. Then, at precisely 11:47 a.m., every system on the bus suddenly synchronized with the correct timeline. The electronic displays flickered briefly before showing Thursday, March 9th. The GPS reverted to Thursday's route configuration. The onboard announcements began welcoming passengers to Thursday morning service. Most unnervingly, Passengers who had received Friday-dated tickets found that the timestamps on their receipts had retroactively changed to reflect the current day. Our eighth case takes us beyond Earth's atmosphere to the International Space Station, where an experienced astronaut encountered something that challenged her understanding of consciousness itself. Commander Lisa Rodriguez had logged over 300 hours in space across 2 previous missions. Every aspect of orbital operations had become second nature to her, from delicate docking procedures to the precise timing required for scientific experiments. During her 3rd mission in November 2022, Rodriguez was monitoring the station's attitude control system during what should have been a routine orbital adjustment maneuver. She noticed an anomaly in the thruster firing sequence and reached for the manual override controls, her hand moving toward the console with practiced precision. The next moment, she found herself staring at the same console, but her hand was positioned over a completely different set of switches. The disorientation was immediate and profound. Rodriguez had experienced brief moments of confusion during long-duration spaceflight before, but this was fundamentally different. She hadn't lost consciousness or fallen asleep. Her awareness had simply jumped forward, skipping over what should have been 24 seconds of continuous experience. Mission Control in Houston recorded something even more extraordinary during that same time frame. For exactly 24 seconds, beginning at mission elapsed time 1943-17, the space station appeared to be transmitting duplicate telemetry streams. Every sensor, monitoring device, and communication system generated identical data packets that arrived simultaneously through separate transmission pathways. Flight Director Michael Chen initially attributed the anomaly to a communication relay malfunction. Satellites occasionally experience timing errors that could create the appearance of duplicate signals, but the more his team analyzed the data, the more disturbing the implications became. The duplicate streams weren't copies or echoes. They represented genuine real-time telemetry from 2 versions of the same spacecraft operating in identical orbital positions. Dr. Sarah Kim, the mission's biomedical officer, reviewed Rodriguez's physiological monitoring data with growing concern. During the 24-second window, the astronaut's vital signs showed a pattern that defied medical explanation. Her heart rate, brain activity, and metabolic indicators all registered normal readings, but the timestamps created an impossible sequence. The data suggested that Rodriguez had experienced the missing 24 seconds normally, while simultaneously not experiencing them at all. The 9th anomaly involves a journalist who received tomorrow's news today, delivered with the same casual reliability as his morning coffee. James Patterson worked as a freelance journalist in Portland, Oregon, covering local politics and community events for several regional publications. His daily routine included checking his front porch for deliveries before beginning his morning research sessions. On December 8, 1999, he discovered a newspaper that would fundamentally alter his understanding of how information flows through time. The Portland Tribune lay folded on his doorstep exactly as it appeared every morning, secured with the same rubber band used by his regular delivery service. The paper felt normal, smelled like fresh newsprint, and showed the familiar wear patterns consistent with standard printing and distribution. The only anomaly was the date printed clearly across the masthead, December 9th, 1999. According to every calendar, clock, and digital device in his possession, it was still December 8th. Patterson initially assumed the newspaper had been misdated during printing, a mistake that occasionally occurred during busy news cycles or holiday periods. But as he scanned the headlines, he realized he was examining something far more extraordinary than a simple production error. The front page contained detailed coverage of events that hadn't yet occurred. The lead story described a water main break that would allegedly flood downtown Portland during the afternoon rush hour. A secondary article reported on city council decisions from a meeting that wouldn't convene until the following evening. The sports section contained complete game results from December 9th matches, including player statistics and post-game commentary that read like genuine journalistic coverage rather than speculative preview material. Most unsettling was a brief article describing a traffic accident involving a delivery truck and motorcycle at the intersection of Burnside and 23rd Avenue, complete with specific details about injuries, emergency response times, and statements from witnesses quoted by name. Throughout December 9th, Patterson watched in growing amazement as every prediction in the mysterious newspaper came true with surgical precision. The water main break occurred at exactly 2:37 p.m., flooding the precise streets mentioned in the advance coverage. The city council meeting proceeded exactly as reported, with members voting on ordinances in the identical sequence described in the preview article. The motorcycle accident happened at 4:51 p.m. at the specified intersection, involving the same vehicle types and producing the same injuries detailed in the Prophetic report. When Patterson attempted to share the newspaper with his editor and colleagues, he discovered something even more disturbing. The text was changing before his eyes, headlines shifting subtly to reflect events as they actually unfolded rather than as they had been predicted. Quotes attributed to specific individuals morphed into different statements that matched what those people actually said when interviewed. It was as if the newspaper was continuously rewriting itself to maintain consistency with the timeline it had somehow accessed in advance. By evening, the paper had become completely ordinary, containing exactly the same content that appeared in regular editions distributed throughout the city. When Patterson compared it to newspapers purchased from vendors and delivered to neighbors, every word was identical. The Prophetic version had apparently edited itself into conformity with standard reality. Our 10th and final case involves an entire community that experienced a collective reality adjustment so comprehensive it challenged the very nature of existence itself. Clearwater Falls had always been the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbours, where children played safely in tree-lined streets, and where the most significant news typically involved high school sports scores or seasonal festivals. The population of 4,037 residents lived in a community that prided itself on stability and predictability. Nothing ever changed dramatically in Clearwater Falls, which was exactly how the residents preferred it. On the morning of August 15th, 2023, those residents discovered they were living in a town that was simultaneously familiar and impossibly different. The changes were subtle enough that many people initially dismissed them as simple oversights or failures of memory. Janet Morrison noticed that her house, which had been painted sage green for over a decade, now displayed a warm yellow exterior that looked as if it had been that colour for years. The paint showed appropriate weathering patterns and maintained the same minor imperfections she remembered, just in a completely different hue. Dr. William Chen, the town's only veterinarian, arrived at his clinic to find that his longtime patients were behaving as if they had never met him before. Dogs that had been friendly and trusting for years cowered when he approached. Cats that typically allowed him to handle them without restraint hissed and attempted to flee. The animals' medical records remained unchanged, showing years of routine care under his supervision, but their behavioural responses suggested they had no memory of their previous interactions. The geographic anomalies proved even more disconcerting. Maple Street, which had connected the town centre to the residential district for over 50 years, was now called Maple Avenue. Every street sign, official document, and map showed the name change as if it had always been that way. Residents who had lived on Maple Street for decades found themselves holding driver's licenses and property deeds that listed their address as Maple Avenue, with no evidence that any name change had ever officially occurred. Sarah Williams, who worked as the town librarian, discovered that historical records contained events that contradicted her personal memories of local history. The library's archives showed documentation of a summer festival that had allegedly been held annually for 20 years, complete with photographs, news clippings, and city council records approving permits and funding. Williams had lived in Clearwater Falls for her entire 34 years and had no memory of such a festival ever occurring. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, a psychologist from the nearby state university, led the investigation into these anomalies. Initially approaching the situation as a case study in collective memory disorders, she soon encountered patterns that challenged conventional explanations. The changes weren't random or chaotic. They formed coherent, alternate versions of the town's recent history that were internally consistent and supported by comprehensive physical evidence. The Yellow House had appropriate documentation showing paint purchases and contractor invoices dating back to its supposed original painting. The veterinary records included detailed notes about animal behavior patterns that matched their current responses rather than what Dr. Chen remembered. The street name change was supported by city planning documents that showed Maple Avenue had been the official designation since the street's creation. Dr. Hendricks's final report contained conclusions she initially hesitated to include. The evidence suggested that Clearwater Falls had experienced what she could only describe as a localized reality adjustment event. Rather than residents developing false memories about their community, it appeared that the community itself had shifted into a slightly different version of its own existence. These 10 cases represent documented instances of temporal anomalies that have occurred in recent years, each one challenging our fundamental understanding of how reality operates. The evidence suggests that our timeline may not be as stable as we assume, that reality itself appears capable of revision, correction, and fundamental alteration in ways that defy everything we think we know about the nature of time and existence. Looking at these 10 documented anomalies, a terrifying picture emerges of reality that's far more fragile than we ever imagined. From missing hours that leave no trace to entire towns that quietly reboot themselves overnight, the evidence suggests our timeline isn't the stable foundation we thought it was. These cases span decades and continents, involving ordinary people who experienced extraordinary impossibilities that challenge the very nature of existence. The mathematical odds of these events occurring by pure chance are so ridiculously small, they break the calculators we use to measure probability. We're not talking about vague coincidences or half-remembered dreams. We're looking at documented events with witnesses, physical evidence, and digital records that tell the same impossible story. The consistency across multiple independent cases creates a pattern too precise to dismiss as random anomalies. Whether we've slipped into an alternate dimension or reality itself is breaking down around us, one thing is certain. The world we're living in now isn't the same one we were born into. The question isn't whether timeline shifts are happening, but how many times they've already occurred without us even noticing. These glitches in the matrix might not be isolated incidents, but symptoms of something far more profound happening to the fabric of space and time itself.